Okay, thinking about the difference between having a visible medical challenge, or having depression, which is kind of like the unseen illness that it's not really obvious, and how at least this restaurant in Edmonds discriminates, and I'm sure lots of others do. It's funny how like little kids adults are, or like flocks of chickens. If somebody's not the same as everybody else, they get singled out. People come to make up stories about them, or assume things, and based on those assumptions come up with stories. But I'm just going with what I know about what happened to me, and depression isn't really that big of a deal. It's a chemical imbalance in your body. I guess it's like 1 out of every 4 Americans have depression, and they're projecting that by, I think it's 2020, that depression is going to be like one of the top 2 leading causes of death in this country. So it's a big deal, and I think that it's important that people are aware of what it is and learn to coexist with people who have depression, because one day it might be you, or one day it might be somebody who does count to you. You know, are we going to shun everybody that has this illness? Are we going to misunderstand and persecute people who have this illness? It's not something people can help. A good example of how immensely profound a chemical imbalance is, how much it can affect somebody. Let's look at the Florida cannibal guy, okay? Seems like a nice guy from what people say. A little weird, but mostly nice, you know, seems like a nice guy. You know, he's apparently a Christian. He's a Bible thumper. He has a Bible with him all the time. People, you know, he went to a party. I'm quite sure that he had no thought in his head when he went to this party that he was going to later dine on somebody's face. But then he took some kind of drug, bath salts, that changed him, basically. Turned him into a monster. Turned him completely into something other than who he is. Turned him into what is more like a chimpanzee. I mean, chimpanzees commit cannibalism. You know, I've seen videos of them ripping apart monkeys. You know, I don't know if it's a different species, but it would be like us eating bushmeat, which is apes. But this drug, bath salts, profoundly changed this man's personality and how he functions and how he thinks, and basically turned him into something like lower down on the evolutionary tree. You know, apparently that chemical, whatever the chemical is that drug has in it, changes the body chemistry so much that the behavior is radically different and violent and animalistic. This is just me speculating, because I really don't know anything about any of this, but that's a chemical change. That's a chemical imbalance. The guy who ate the guy's face was suffering a chemical imbalance. Now, I can't really feel too sorry for him, because the idiot took this drug, and I'm sorry, but the guy who had this horrible thing happen to him and is going to be disfigured for life didn't really ask for this guy to take this drug and do what he did. So it's really hard for me to feel sorry for the guy who's dead now. But at the same time, he was under the influence of some really nasty shit. And now somebody with depression, or any mental health illness, but depression is one that a lot of it is, you know, it's kind of like a vicious circle. You have a chemical imbalance, so your thoughts work differently, and you have a harder time dealing with, your emotions, everything seems bigger. Anyway, it's like they fuel each other. But the bottom line is people don't ask to be depressed. People don't walk around and go, gee, if I'm sad enough for long enough, I might get to have depression. It's not what it is. So it's just, it's an illness that happens to people. And some people are more susceptible. Some people are more susceptible to it than others. It's not something that people ask for. It's not something they can help. And when somebody's aware they have this illness and they're battling, trying to get better, the last thing they need is to be persecuted and blamed and treated like shit and rejected by people, rejected by society when they're trying to get better and they're trying to, it's hard to get better anyway, but when you have no support and you have no understanding. Back to the restaurant thing. I was depressed at this restaurant, obviously depressed, and I completely understand people who didn't want to sit by me and have me bring them down. They were there to have a good time, and who wants to have somebody there, some gloomy Gus, bringing them down, talking about herself constantly. Oh, poor me, poor me, poor me. How old is that going to get? I completely understand how people can get tired of it and not maybe want to deal. And maybe people who have had worse problems and managed to get through them easier might look at somebody who's like a poor me at a bar and feel some contempt while this, whatever, Kind of like when you hear a kid crying at Toys R Us because he or she can't get the toy that they want. You're like, wait till you grow up, kid. Wait till you see what real problems feel like, Maybe that's how it is for somebody who's been through a lot of shit. Seeing somebody who thinks they've had a really bad time when really, by comparison to what you've gone through, nothing, Maybe that's part of it. But the fact is, everybody reacts differently to bad stuff, what they perceive as bad stuff. And nobody knows where this person has come from, what else they've had to deal with in their lives that have piled up on, below what you just see on the surface. Some people have triggers, things that happen today that bring on really bad physical or emotional reactions. I have this wonderful one where if someone comes behind me and puts their arms around my throat, that's a real hard one for me. And I'm going to be 50 years old, and I still have a hard time, and that's from way back when I was a kid. So, okay, everybody at this bar knew that I had depression, and that everybody could see that I was most of the time sitting by myself because nobody else wanted to sit by me because I had depression. Is it so hard to imagine why I might have enjoyed talking to the one person who was okay with talking to me? This one bartender who didn't turn his back, and he was okay, and he gave me lots of attention. Why is that so hard to imagine that might mean something to me, and that might be something that makes my day, that I look forward to going and talking to somebody who looks at me like, there's hope for me, and I'm not a bad person. Somebody who has depression has an illness, and they go to a restaurant, and by their actions and their demeanor and how they act, I said actions already. Well, anyway, they should know this person has an illness, a depression. That's an illness. We had a guy at this restaurant who came in, and he had an illness that made him look like he was asleep all the time, and people knew he had an illness, and I don't think he got persecuted. I don't think he got 86 for having an illness. It probably made some people uncomfortable, but I don't think he got 86 for it. There's a lady that walked into that restaurant who had osteoporosis. I think that's what that's called. Well, she had whatever, where you're bent over really a lot. Women get it a lot when they lose calcium in their bones. She had this, and she's very bent over, and she would come in, and she's looking at the ground as she's walking to her chair, and I don't, it might have made some people uncomfortable. I know it made me feel bad when I looked at her. It's like, oh, I feel bad for her, and I hope I never have to suffer that, because it's more likely for women than men. But they didn't 86 her for making people uncomfortable. Why is somebody who has depression, and you know, it's kind of obvious they do, and they're trying really hard to be happy, they're trying really hard to turn it around and be nice to people and not be a downer. Why is it okay to 86 somebody like that, who is, just because some people are made uncomfortable by that person? You know, and if somebody is making out like this person is after them, you already know that this person suffers from an illness, okay? So they're not thinking and acting like somebody who isn't suffering from an illness. Why would you not go up to that person and ask them, you know, this behavior seems odd to us, can you explain? You know, why do you do this? Why do you go sit down by the window? Why do you go outside sometimes and you know, of course they never asked me about that, but why do you write notes to our staff? Which there was just one, and it was because he got me very confused, and also because he thought he let me think that we were friends, and I write all my friends a lot. Ask any of them. So that's all. I just feel that discrimination is wrong, and I feel that this bar discriminated against me because I had depression, and they knew it. And rather than find out what was going on in my head, or what was going on that was motivating me to be the way I was, they didn't want to find out. They just went along with the things that this bartender wanted them to assume, and they punished me for it. They punished me for what the bartender let them assume about me. After 3 years of getting to be punished by what people assumed about me, because the bartender never corrected anybody. I sometimes I just wanted to say to him, why don't you stand up for me? Why don't you tell these regulars that have this thing against me, who think that I'm after you, why don't you just tell them the truth? You know, we talked about it. He asked me outright, are you after me? You know, before this whole thing happened that night. And I said no. I told him my heart couldn't go there, because he's married. I was married. I wouldn't do that to anybody I wouldn't do that to somebody that I don't know. You know, I wouldn't do that because I know how it would make me feel if someone had done that with Mark. If, you know, now that in retrospect I have to think that maybe my husband was doing stuff behind my back when he was pretending to be impotent for 6 years. That's disrespectful. I'd rather have somebody be honest than to pretend and hide things behind my back in a marriage. So anyway, that's all. I just feel like discrimination is wrong. Discrimination against somebody for being depressed is wrong. I did try to go to the Washington State Commission for Human Rights about this, but again, it had been too much time had elapsed, and also it's really hard to prove that. You can prove that there aren't wheelchair accessibility to an establishment. You know, you can prove that, or you can prove that somebody was declined service because they had Tourette syndrome, and they're being really rude and obnoxious, and people think they're, you know, and they have an illness. You can prove that too, but you can't really prove somebody has depression and they're being discriminated against. You can't prove that. And so I didn't have a chance of hell with them or the Better Business Bureau. And certainly I couldn't appeal to the bar, to the owners of the restaurant or the corporation. All they care about, like I said before, all they care about is covering their ass. They don't care that the bartender did this. They don't want to know. They don't want to hear about it. Anyway, I've been down that road before, so I'll end this now. Like I said, I think discrimination is wrong, and this is a growing epidemic. Loneliness, I've read, loneliness is a growing epidemic in this country, and so depression is also going to become more rampant in this country. And I think we need to start taking a hard look at how people are treated who have depression. It's not something that we ask for.